It's time for EdTech Mondays, brought to you by MasterCard Foundation and CC Hub.
Welcome to EdTech Mondays Nigeria, a platform that facilitates critical conversations on the use of technology for teaching and learning. I am Chinyelu Akpa, your host on the show, and it's good to be back here again. On EdTech Mondays Nigeria this month, we are discussing strengthening Nigeria's EdTech ecosystem through sustainable public-private partnerships. As Nigeria continues to scale up technology-driven solutions in education, sustainable private-public partnerships, PPPs, have emerged as a powerful lever to strengthen the EdTech ecosystem. However, bridging the gap between public needs and private innovation requires clear strategies, shared values, and collaborative accountability. This four-part series explores how partnerships between the government, private sector players, development organizations, and communities can unlock affordable access to EdTech, support responsive policies, and ensure that investments and innovations lead to tangible impacts. Continuing from the conversation last month, where we explored the need for foundational infrastructure and investment for EdTech growth, this month, we are diving into strengthening Nigeria's EdTech ecosystem. We'll be unpacking why PPPs matter more than ever, what makes them work, and how both public and private players can collaborate to drive impact at scale. So join me as we dive into the conversation. Today, I'm excited to meet and have good conversation with two exceptional guests. Our first guest is a seasoned economist, policy expert, and executive leader, currently serving as the Group Managing Director of New Globe Nigeria, where he leads partnerships with the government to transform basic education for over 1 million children. With a rich background that includes advising the Vice President of Nigeria, directing policy for Africa at Women's World Banking, and heading government relations at the Nigerian Stock Exchange, he has influenced key reforms and strategic initiatives across the public and private sectors. Join me this morning to welcome Dr. Akinyele Soji.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
And our second guest is a digital platforms and partnerships expert with over 9 years of experience driving innovations across telecommunications, fintech, FMCG, and media sectors. At MTN Nigeria, he serves as manager, platforms and partnerships, and currently acts as senior manager, product and ecosystem development, leading strategic initiatives that boost platform adoption and service delivery. He's a firm believer in the power of public-private partnerships to drive impact, particularly in education. Join me this morning to welcome Joshua Esiebo.
Thank you very much.
I hope I got that name.
Yeah. Actually, very one of the first people that got it right.
Yeah.
At the first try. Yeah, so thank you.
So
Pleasure
good.
to be
Welcome, Joshua. Welcome, Dr. Akinyele Soji. It's good to have you. This episode is very simple. PPPs for EdTech in Nigeria. I'll just straight open. What do you think about that? And you come from two big parts or two big divides in the huge EdTech conversation in Nigeria. So just, to muck up the waters a little bit, how do you see the EdTech scene in Nigeria first from your own perspective, Dr. Soji? Then we go to you, Joshua. I know that you're not particularly in education, but you are sitting at the table and the helms of affairs for people who are supposed to, enable EdTech in Nigeria. Correct. So I'd like to understand where you sit around your perspectives on how well or not EdTech is doing in Nigeria before we begin to get into the partnerships conversation.
Well, thank you again, and congratulations to your team on this phenomenal platform.
Thank you.
I think it's been 5 years running now. Yeah. PPPs are not new to Nigeria. I mean, public-private partnerships essentially suggests that there should be a collaboration between government and the private sector to deliver let's call them difficult, if you like, public services, or sometimes what you call wicked problems, that just
I know someone that says
that just keeps evolving and sort of worsening, even when you try to when you try to solve it. We've seen PPPs in infrastructure, hard infrastructure, PPPs in health. And clearly, education is one place that will definitely benefit, from PPP intervention. Now, in this case, we're talking about EdTech interventions. And again, Nigeria is not new to the technology wave. In fact, the technology sector is literally the fastest growing sector in the economy. The resilience, passed through COVID, passed through everything. So latching on to, or rather leveraging technology in education is really the way to go. The real challenge is technology can be expensive. Technology has its unique factors, if you really need it to get the work done. And education has always been, some kind of social enterprise. It's been seen as, this is a developmental thing. But technology is for efficiency. It's for enhancing, services. So when you bring those two together, you need to then think of how to make sure that technology is not frustrated, in the education space. And that's where...
It's not frustrated and frustrating.
Exactly. Okay, so it's not frustrated and frustrating.
Yeah.
And that's where the PPP comes in.
Okay.
Because for education to scale, you need the government, because they are custodians of public education, public sector interventions. For education to be efficient, in the sense, and cutting edge, you need the private sector, because they are the users of education, the skilled workforce and all of that. They know where technically the direction of education should go. So bringing those two together and finding a shared goal is the way to achieve a PPP. And we've seen, many of that going on. And I'm sure we'll talk about that later.
Great, Joshua.
I think for me, when you look at it from the perspective that about 7% of the budget allocation only goes to education, to start with, that leaves a room for PPP to come on board and to thrive. Particularly also from a point of view of, like Doctor said, privates understand the gaps, that are inherent in the workforce, right? So PPPs can be that model, right, where we can enable solutions by delivering on the complex problems that, maybe the policymakers, the government really don't want to go to. We can also bring finances, right? PPP enables finance to come through and then also provide support through enablement, through skill resource, through also accountability as well. When you look at it from that point of view, maybe just providing support where the government is not able to deliver when necessary. I think PPP is really the way to go. And of course, if you look at other area of the economics, right? Infrastructure, like you said, even health, like you said, education remains very critical to any growing nation. Education is very critical. And I think for us in Nigeria, a good way to really scale and a good way to really move ahead of that curve is through public partnership and with private.
Great. So we've laid the foundation for the conversation this month, which is very important. And I'll dive right in to ask, in all your years and your experience with what you have done, what you're currently doing, what would you say are some of the glaring areas where we need public-private partnerships to push EdTech in Nigeria? And I'd like to refer to something you said, Dr. Soji, where you mentioned that, and just, rephrasing, from our conversation last month, a big problem is a lot of organizations, and now I'd say privates, thinking education is public good. So when it comes to things like investments, nobody's willing to do the patient investments that education requires to see it grow and, achieve, improve learning outcomes and the rest. So what are some of the glaring areas that you feel PPPs are required to push EdTech currently in Nigeria? And you can think about it from any area, from the product bit of it, from the resources, from the skills, talent, investments.
Yes, it's an open field. That question you tapped into is as old as the 1970s. Okay. Education, is it a public good? Or is it a commodity in the sense? And I think the jury is still out because, as you know, in the education space, you have private sector players and you still have development players that are both pushing education today. So I think what the PPP does is the PPP conversation is to try and bring the entire ecosystem together. Look, regardless of what divide you are on, we all agree that we need to advance, in education here. What are the areas where, EdTech can solve for, if you like, or, a PPP model can solve for? I think one of the first areas is just enhancing the mode of delivery. If you walk into any traditional classroom today, and just to use that demarcation, a traditional classroom, you still see, chalkboards, manual, teaching scripts and scripted guides and things like that. Just being able to enhance that, and take away some of the time that is that the teacher, expends rather than, teaching the students. So you could digitize that, talk about scripted guides and just make things a little more efficient and standardized, across, so that in the case of a public primary school in, I won't call any local government, in the urban center is teaching the same thing as a primary school in, a rural area. So that's an important thing. Just enhancing, the mode of delivery, standardization and the mode of delivery. The next thing also is capacity for the teacher. I was just thinking to myself today that after NCE, what else does a teacher, experience in terms of training?
Let's not get into that.
So the that's what technology is for. We have so many, learning platforms, that can actually now target the teacher as a change agent. Before now, of course, we've seen platforms or models where you are giving the students, digital devices and all of that. But how about the teacher, who is actually the adult in the room? I'm talking now in the case of primary schools or even secondary schools, who is the adult in the room? Have you targeted the intervention to upskill that teacher, to build capacity for that teacher? That's clearly a gap that, EdTech, can solve for. And then, of course, there's the funding gap. And funding here, for me, I like to say it's not even the volume of the fund. It's about redirecting the funding where it actually solves. Yes, 7% of the budget, that's not enough, we know. But how efficient, the value of every kobo, every naira, used in that 7% versus the outcomes, in the education space today. So just being able to be more efficient in the utilization of an already, shortfall in the budget. And then by that proof of concept, which is what EdTech also does, by that proof of concept that, look, this is something that can work, how can we scale it? Then you come to the public sector and say, look, this is something that can work, how can we collaborate with you, to scale things like this? And those are some of the things that we do.
So following up on what Dr. Soji had said, right? I remember sometimes towards the end of last year, we did this focus group on actually PPP, stakeholders' involvement in education. We had teachers, we had parents, we had, everybody around the ecosystem.
Invited. I wasn't invited.
Yeah, don't worry. Now I've noted you, in the next cohort, we will invite you. But we invited everybody across the value chain. I mean, down to PTEs, right? And one thing was common across the room. It was the skills. But skills of who? The teachers, right? So remember, if you're talking about EdTech now, the people that will deliver the learnings are also the teachers. If the teachers do not have the required skills to present, for instance, to take courses, to present their ideas, you won't have that standard or that quality material to even produce to become EdTech solutions, for instance. So it's very important for that teacher's training to be well managed, right? And to have like a standard. Sometimes also last year, I think I came across a platform that I think is really doing well, School Linker, right? Where even beyond your NCE, they're able to provide additional learning and skill certifications for teachers, right? Yeah. And so that is something that is good, that should be encouraged and also should be scaled. I also think that access and affordability, when we're talking about EdTech, now it means that we're bringing education to smartphones or to devices. Parents need to, of course, because children cannot afford it, right? So parent needs to be able to have access and should be able to afford it, right? And when I say afford, I'm looking at it from a point of view of, if you're looking at it from a Maslow point of view, hierarchy of need, of course, a parent should have eaten, should have the security, should have their food, should have everything taken care of. Of course, education is important, but if it is affordable enough, right, it becomes easy for them to be able to leverage and then pass it on to their children. But with PPP, we can make it affordable, particularly also from a telco point of view, right? We can make education accessible and affordable.
I'm sure that our listeners are itching to have me latch on what Joshua has said now about this affordability conversation. And I'm torn between running with that or sticking to the script. Well, but I think I want to nudge a little bit about this question of affordability. Yeah. On whose table does this conversation lie? Because this was something that we discussed extensively, but not exhaustively last month. Where does affordability begin and where does it stop? Who should be pushing it? Very sweet. Last month, we had a product owner from Wi-Fi Combat who was here last month. And she said, we want to have the conversations. And the person from the telco is saying, go crunch the numbers and come to me. True. And the person said, I don't know what numbers to crunch. It's not making sense to me. So you see that there is the need to have that PPP for affordability. However, the technical knowledge to drive the conversation is missing because they know that they want to make their services affordable. Someone who is building a platform for K-12 learning wants to get as many children as possible in Nigeria. And they say they walk up to maybe a telco that has the biggest reach in Nigeria and you're asking, what do I do? But there isn't that skill set.
I mean, of course, right? That's where it becomes
because this is where the partnership starts. This is how
complex or a difficult
technical it is.
Problem, right?
Yes.
I mean, if you look at it, who really needs to bite the bullet? Is it the government? Is it the private? Is it? I mean, but if I look at it from where I sit, right, I wouldn't say that the private should take the lead on this because they already have massive and huge cost center to start with, right? But at the end of the day, what they want is value, right? So if a product owner or even, let's say someone building, an EdTech solution says, okay, you know what, I have the solution that I think that can deliver X, Y, Z. If you're coming to a private, what a private really wants to see is what value do I get in return, right? The mistake I think most people make is bringing a solution that is kind of one-sided, right? When you present your ideas, you're not presenting from a value point of view to the private, right? You're coming from the idea that, these guys, they have money, they've just declared profit, so let me just take these ideas. But you're not coming with a solution to say, okay, if you can partner with me on this solution, this is what you also get in return, right? That's on one leg. On the other leg, from maybe public or government point of view, I think government can also have standards, right? Of course, it's not going to be easy. There'll be a lot of deliberations, maybe a lot of policy tinkering and all of that. But if government can also provide maybe like some policy directions to say, okay, you know what, maybe we'll give tax break, for instance. If a private institution is willing to take on, this problem for us, maybe we'll give tax break, for instance, or maybe we'll do this, we'll do that. That can enable private to come with confidence and say, okay, let's take on this problem, right? Let's not leave it just to the government. Let's see how we can support and then provide maybe comprehensive solution to this very complex problem. Because trust me, affordability is also very relative, right? Yeah. What is affordable to me might not be affordable to you. So for us to be able to reach, and the numbers, I mean, we have almost 20 million children out of school. The number is there, right? But also remember, this 20 million children out of school, some of them don't even have devices. Their parents don't even have devices. So if you're saying affordability, where are we looking at it from? Is it from providing the devices? Is it from providing data? Or is it from even producing this content? So it's just a lot of...
It's a wicked problem.
It's a wicked problem that we need to continue to workshop. But beyond workshopping, also then providing solutions just directly to the problems.
He's correct. I mean, affordability definitely is a problem. But I'd like to say that it's the solution is shared responsibility. Because if you're sharing the goals, then you must also share the responsibilities for action. And definitely, so the ecosystem needs to come to the table. What we've done, in the sense, in partnering with, so for instance, we partner with about 5 states in Nigeria now, supporting their public primary education system, is to solve for it by workshopping with them. So we understand that this is, again, the intervention here and the agent in the room is the teacher. So this is not digital devices for children, because then, that affordability issue may come up, right? Because that's mass digitization or digital empowerment. But how about if you empower the teacher? And so therefore, what then does the teacher need on a digital device? And then what type of digital device? We're not talking about,
something that's high-end and
exactly
obviously
that can then be diverted and repurposed in the market. No, these are digital devices that
doing
can
the barest minimum but still achieving what you want to do.
exactly. So 2G bandwidth, can work within a local area network. Where there's no data, the head teacher and the teachers are still able to sync. You are able to work on it when they charge, for about 2 weeks, depending on how you use it. And then even what is downloaded into the content is about a 2-week amount of content. So even if you're in the most remote areas of Nigeria, and we are, working in some of the most remote areas of Nigeria, you still have, access to your scripted lessons to be able to teach the students. So from that angle, you can see the responsibility in even thinking through, how to crash or how to solve some of those affordability issues. Then there's the part of the government, where the government says, okay, because you are doing this, we're going to repurpose XYZ funds, to make sure that, the State Universal Basic Education Board is able to do this, or the Ministry of Education in that state, is able to do this. So I think it's a shared responsibility point of view where the government sees their own part, the private sector partner or supporter, in the sense also sees what they can do in thinking through, because it's not a one-size-fits-all. We don't need, high-end devices to be able to solve. Most of the time, it's actually very basic kind of. Remember, technology is really just enhancing human effort. So it's not until it's fancy and it's a super powered touch screen or with glossy screens that it has to work. So the question is, how first can we make sure that the tools can work even in the most basic form or most remote form? Then we begin to layer on that to see, because if you want to solve affordability, it's not just about this is the cost of it, go and find the money. No, there are other things that you can solve for. So how can we make that thing, still workable, the device, but at much lower cost? Right? So
Thank you.
That's where it solves from.
Really profound, Dr. Akin, because you've answered the question I was going to ask, and I was going to ask something. Can you give a simple cheat code for what it means to partner with the government, going by how you have gotten into about 5 states, if you mentioned, at New Globe? And it's something that most EdTech organizations are aspiring to do, because education is still largely on the government. And if you really want to solve for education in Nigeria, you have to look for a way to put your product in front of the government and make it make sense to them. So there's a bit about, like you said, workshopping with them and helping them see first, or helping them understand what the problem is, and now designing, ways to reduce costs to the barest minimum without it being overly sophisticated. Thank you so much. I'll say my final question on this episode this week. I know we have a lot to discuss, but the final question go to you, Joshua. Considering the work being championed by the Federal Ministry of Communication and Digital Economy to improve broadband access, how can telcos deepen their role beyond just connectivity to become stronger partners in the EdTech ecosystem?
Thank you very much. I think that's a great question, which also aligns with what we've been trying to do as well. Beyond just being enablers, right? We want to be part of the value chain, part of the ecosystem, right? And that's one of the things we've been able to do. We like to pride ourselves in MTN, for instance, as making sure that everyone deserves the benefit of a modern connected life, right? So what does that mean? It means that in any strata, in any phase of your life, you should be able to enjoy the benefit of a modern connected life. For a student, the benefit of a modern connected life means they should have access, to content, education content, for instance. So beyond just you offering your core services as a telco, which is just voice and data, can you then maybe begin to build courses, right? Or partner with EdTech companies, for instance, that can provide content that can maybe be affordable, right, in that sense, to the customers? Can you begin to look at programs that maybe also aligns with your organization's goals as well, to be able to deliver value? Because beyond the facade, at the end of the day, education is education, depending on whatever platform, be it EdTech, be it traditional, mode of delivery. At the end of the day, the core is that you're passing on knowledge, right? And then you're passing value. But the greatest thing I think that telcos really can do is to just be part of, move beyond being enablers, providing data, and move beyond that. Be part of the players, develop materials, curriculum, partner with people that are already doing great things and help them scale. Because one of the issues that we've also seen is we have people with great content, but they don't know how to take it to the market, for instance, right? So how can we be part of that, value chain and say, okay, you know what? bring your content. Let's see how we can help you scale, reach the market. And then, of course, it becomes bigger, right? And bigger. So these are the conversations that need to happen. But like I typically say, beyond just having these conversations, right, we need to begin to take actionable steps, right? So it's becoming interesting by the day, I must say, because we also just launched Digital Skills Academy last week, where it's open to majorly to the youth. You can upskill yourself, right? And these are the initiatives that telco needs to begin to leverage on, of course, powered by the regulator, right, to do this. So imagine everyone with a shared responsibility doing this, in their own space. Then we begin to build a community of people that are open to learning, of course, which I believe everyone should be open to learning. If the material is there, the platform is there, and then the whole community becomes a better place for everyone.
Okay, before I ask the question, I'm playing devil's advocate. So see me with my horns. You've mentioned the bit about, inviting people who have amazing products and make it make sense, with costing and that. I remember that for the third cohort of the Mastercard Foundation EdTech Fellowship Program, we received over 300 applications from EdTech organizations in Nigeria alone.
Wow.
Imagine a world where you have 300 viable EdTech solutions coming to you. Hello? I don't see you having the time to speak to every person. So wouldn't it be more beneficial that there is a service that could be for lack of a better word, CSR, that telcos like you are able to offer, that are educating, or a masterclass series that are educating, or that would educate these EdTech product owners and startups on what it means to partner with EdTech organizations? And I'm saying this from the standpoint of having to support in the past 2 years over 48 EdTech startups with distribution across Nigeria and Kenya. And the big thing is, I don't even know how to go about this. I don't know what they need. And it's a big bane on the partnerships with that sector, not knowing what these guys need. If there's a checklist, what is the checklist? I know that if I have to get into maybe NERDC, I know what the checklist is to get into, that it has to be approved, it has to be curriculum aligned. But what the telcos, is there a checklist? Something as basic as that to start the conversation.
Yeah, to be honest, there's a checklist, but beyond just the checklist, right? And I think it's not necessarily just even for EdTech. I think it's a bane even across the nation, where the information really is out there. Right. But people don't know how to access the information.
Wonderful.
Instance, right? Or people are just maybe lethargic to take the next step. So, for instance, I got a notice to be here, right? I didn't think I applied to be here, for instance, right? That's someone taking the next step to get in contact or to get in touch. It's as simple as that. Gaining access to the room. I've seen someone that was so desperate to get his product delivered to us walk into the office to say, I have this product, right? So it's a complex situation, to be honest. You really cannot say this is a one-size-fits-all. But talking about checklist, of course, because you're a highly regulated entity, there are a couple of checklists that aligns with the regulator, which when you come into the room, we will advise. To be honest, education is one of our key strategic focus, which was why I said that we started, like, for instance, the focus group discussion last year, right? And it continues to be a key strategic focus for us, right? We are open to partner with as much education platform that have value, that we believe can deliver value to our customers, right? And it's something that we're happy to do. So I know you do have people that are open to, how they can scale, you can please send them our way. I'll be happy to engage.
I promise to take you up on that. And on that note, we end this week's conversation on strengthening public-private sector partnerships for EdTech growth in Nigeria. To you, our listeners, have you had as much fun as we've had, learning? I have a notepad here and I've been taking notes. I don't know about you. But I'd love to hear from you. What areas would you like to see more public-private sector partnerships for EdTech in Nigeria? Are you a product owner? Have you had either a beautiful or sour experience trying to get into any type of partnership to grow your solution to improve learning in Nigeria. I would love to hear from you. Send us an SMS or a WhatsApp message via 0703 165 0809 or 0706 402 0742. I'll take that again. Send an SMS or a WhatsApp message to 0703 165 0809 or 0706 402 0742. You could also join our very vibrant and active communities on WhatsApp and Telegram. And if you would love to go over this conversation again, quickly run over to Spotify, EdTech Mondays Nigeria, or YouTube, CC Hub Africa to listen and drop your comment. Until I come your way same time next week, I remain your host, Chinyelu Akpa. Keep using technology to push the barriers and get into new frontiers in education. It's bye for now.
It's time for EdTech Mondays, brought to you by MasterCard Foundation and CC Hub.